Greetings, dear friends! Today in the ALLATRA TV studio, we welcome the esteemed Igor Mikhailovich Danilov.
Greetings.
Igor Mikhailovich, in the previous video, you said the following phrase: "Do you know who is ahead of the whole planet? The one who is alive. That one has nothing to be afraid of. And this is the ultimate value. This is the meaning of human existence here, to gain life. If a person has gained it, he has nothing to be afraid of." And this key phrase, it seems to me, was noted by many people from different countries. And they understand how important it is to live by love, to gain this life, here and now. People thank you and share that these words of yours, and actually a whole previous video, fills them from within very much and inspires them to action and gives an understanding and feeling of what the real inner support is, gives an understanding of the inviolability of the spiritual power.
And the truth is always real. Even liars feel the truth, because it is the truth.
There is a lot of positive feedback from people, quite a lot. And people talk about how relevant, timely, and very important this video is. To date, the mass media say that the doomsday clock's hands have been moved 20 seconds ahead. In other words, the time has never approached so close to midnight, which symbolizes the end of time, the end of the world, let's say. And as a consequence, all scientists already begin to talk about the need to do something, to unite somehow, but they do not know what to do.
And you know what's interesting, in my opinion? It's how decadent our humanity, our civilization is, and how far it is from spiritual, how far it is from humanness, that we need to move the clock's hands, which actually point them how much time is left for them here, so that they start thinking that they should be humans. And now you've raised the issue that they finally started talking that people should unite. Organizations and scientists and everyone understands that people need to unite, and what do they offer? What do they want to unite for? A simple question.
It feels like they want this unification, but they don't understand what to do with it and for what purpose they unite.
However, they do not understand why and what for.
Yes, it's aimless.
And for how long have we been telling them? Telling what unification is for, and that it's the only chance, and that the times will be collapsing. But did they believe us?
What does consciousness tell people in the head? That when will it happen?
Tomorrow. Today will pass, and this will be tomorrow. And this is inevitable. Only when we talked about this 4 or 5 years ago, although we talked about this a long time ago, but even 4 or 5 years ago we talked about this, and they didn't listen to us. Why? There was no confirmation. And what does consciousness need? Evidence.
Facts.
Facts.
Prove this.
Arguments. Well, haven't we brought those very facts? Haven't we talked about what will happen? What starts happening? And now, when all this is already happening, well, excuse me, it's already happening. Something which was not supposed to be is already happening. It's the beginning of the end. And everyone feels and understands this. And now they are shyly starting to say that, after all, we must unite at last. We must join hands. And to do what? We mentioned it in previous video, to cover the glaciers with blankets. What do they offer? What to unite for? In the previous video, we definitely answered what is needed and what is the purpose of our unification. And earlier we said a lot, that people can do a lot. But it seems to me that people should grow up a little bit, like a society, because our humanity is actually like small children, and each of them individually, they hope for something and do what they want. You know, it's like kids in a sandbox. They play around in life, take away toys from each other, throw sands at each other, spit at each other, and they're satisfied with that and hope that an adult will come and do something instead of them.
There is also one hope that people voice. After all, ALLATRA will warn us when this X hour will come, won't it? We'll be warned, right?
And what is ALLATRA? A simple question. We should figure out first what ALLATRA is. ALLATRA is all of us. Those who want to do something to convey, isn't it so? But what about the rest of humanity? Don't they have ALLATRA inside? That's the very essence of ALLATRA. We will tell them once again, my friends. Allatra is God's love. And no matter what is it called, it is God's love. And everyone has it since you are here. But what do you do with this love? Why do people fall into the filth? Into disrespect towards each other, into disrespect towards themselves. They don't value life. They don't value what the spiritual world has given them. Why? Because they don't believe in the spiritual world. They doubt it. They doubt themselves. And whom does society believe? The devil. Let's recall the video about the ninth circle. Somehow there is no resonance.
Yes.
Because it's normal. And consciousness easily justifies this in the literal sense of the word. It's understandable. People engage in magic, excuse me. The top rulers of this world, they engage in, let's say, magic, replenishment of forces, by means of which they control our consciousness. Not only mass media. Mass media also play their role, but they are nothing but a transmitter of these forces. If there wasn't such a metaphysical phenomenon which, again, everyone's consciousness doesn't believe in, yet craves to possess this power. Look what a paradox. After all, people are deceived inside their heads, because those actors who pretend to be us and live instead of us divide us already in our consciousness. One says, do not believe. Another one says, what are you talking about? Of course this exists. And the third one says, if only you possess such power, you would be right. Meaning, what does he incite to? To possessing power. And people do not care that babies are slaughtered, because it justifies. They want to become stronger. They want to be richer. They have power after that. No, they manipulate you first and foremost. And your slavish consciousness agrees with that. Why? Because those one receiving additional power strengthen their demons in the head and become stronger, while those who do not receive this power become weaker. And now, after these words, a thought can slip in many that we must strengthen our own demons. Do you see how the system works? Whereas we exactly say that people must study the enemy. And the enemy is none other than the one who is called in religions Iblis, the devil. Generally speaking, we call it the system, right? Again, this is the name of the same thing, but each ascribes to it its own properties, whereas in actual fact, it's an ever-hungry creature living instead of people, something which seeks to make them dead. It's a guard that does not let the immature, that does not let the egoists, let's put it simply, beasts enter heaven. Heaven is not a menagerie.
Because the system actually draws that people are enemies to each other. If we look at the facts of the millennial history of religion, that wars were unleashed precisely on religious grounds, yet not a single religion has ever been, let's say, a precedent to stop this war. Why does this happen?
What do you mean, why? Because in those very religions there are people with the same demons in their heads.
Who are not free from the system.
Of course, slaves, in the literal sense of the word. Slaves of demons, slaves of consciousness, slaves of thirst, profit, and everything else. Isn't that so? And again, what do they learn in religions? Ask God for bread and He will give you. Ask Him for health and He will give you. Ask God for strength to live in matter and He will give you.
Igor Mikhailovich, going back to the question of how people will find out that the X hour or the most difficult times are coming, who will find out about this?
They've already come, and everyone knows about this already. It's just that they haven't unfolded to such an extent yet, but these times have already come. So why should they find out when this will come? And what is meant by the X hour?
When this last day of judgment comes, let's say when the end of the world comes, will people be warned about that?
Of course not. Only the spiritual world knows about that, but it gives people a chance. Isn't that so? Every time it gives people a chance, and people have the right to choose whether the end of the world to be or not. But let's say those who have really gained life and who while still being here are already part of the spiritual world, those ones of course will know, and they do know. Whereas for the rest it will be a surprise. And why would the owner warn the herd when he decides to get rid of it, of the sick herd? After all, this is inhumane. Many will say, but is killing so many people humane? My friends, let's be honest, because many of you listen to the demons in your head who say that in Alatra everything should be honest, in a spiritual way, and if it isn't honest, then it is not in a spiritual way, right? They criticize us for our jokes and many other things, but let's be honest. Are you faithful to God? A simple question. How faithful are you? And how much do you really live by God's love? Or who do you serve, God or Satan? So where does honesty start from, my friends? And who is to blame for the fact that people, how do they justify themselves? We are weak. What are you weak in? In the fact that a thought has come and you accepted it? Do you doubt the spiritual world? You doubt your strength, don't you? Isn't that so?
Yes.
And you think that someone should do something instead of you, while you have been given everything. You have been given the knowledge. Help is coming to you today. A tremendous help. Because the spiritual world doesn't leave people. It helps. But when a drowning man refuses a helping hand, how can he be saved? A simple question. A hand is given to you. You are literally being pulled out from the ice hole of death. But you resist, refuse it, saying, no, I don't want it. You know, I'll digress a little, so that there is an understanding. I'll tell you a little story, so that we can imagine what it looks like from the other side. God forbid. But it is life and everything happens in it. Imagine that you are in a multi-story building. There is a fire. You and your family are there. Your family and friends. Well, the point is not in the family and friends. You, a selfish person, an egoist, are in flames. Everything is on fire, you can't get out. The apartment you are in is on fire. And then firefighters come to the rescue, okay? A ladder is under your window. A fireman climbs up and tells you, reaching out his hand, come, I'll save you. And do you know what you're doing? You ask, excuse me, you don't happen to be a sectarian, do you?
Absurdity.
Excuse me, I don't belong to any religion. Today, there are actually only a few people who profess one religion or another. Everyone else is playing at them. Well, for some people it is beneficial, for others it is a job. While someone wants to seem more spiritual to the neighbors, and someone goes to God like to a genie hoping to get something. These are non-believers. In any religion it is said, by their prophets, by those who brought the knowledge, and what any religion was based on, ask God for nothing but life. Nothing. Because everything you ask for is material and you ask the devil. Or is this wrong, my friends? So, let's get back to our fireman. Isn't that so? Well, you say that everything should be honest. Let's be honest, but let's start with ourselves.
This is a good example, such a parallel.
This is the truth of life.
Igor Mikhailovich, but it was also very much felt and seen how, in parallel with the wonderful feedback that came from people and that wave, so to say, the inspiration for action, there was also the resistance from the system.
And the system should resist, because this is life for it. Look how we fight for life, right? We fight for business, we fight for income, we fight against diseases because we don't want to die. Well, isn't that so? And the system is alive. Our consciousness is alive. It's like a parasite. It lives instead of us.
Instead of us.
But it is extremely scary for it when we become spiritually free. Why? Because a spiritually free person, first of all, puts these demons in his head at the service of the spiritual world. Isn't that so? It is. And that is the meaning of spiritual salvation. But what do these demons do? They resist. They throw in doubts and the like. They make a person suffer, feel a lack of confidence in himself, doubt his spiritual teachings. They destabilize him so that the person would not gain life. For having become himself, having become free, he perfectly understands that consciousness is a tool, a thinking tool, well-oriented in three-dimensionality, and in principle the only way to communicate with the three-dimensionality is our consciousness. But what does it give us? Often it gives false information about the most important things. It tells us the truth about phenomena in three-dimensionality. It shows us colors, shades. Thanks to it we hear, see everything that happens here. We can communicate with each other, talk and understand each other. But is that really each other who we understand? After all, the one we talk to is also often controlled by the same actors who are part of one system.
And some small percentage. After all, the three-dimensional world is actually the third dimension. The system is 6 dimensions.
Only.
And it surely does not see what is greater.
It doesn't see anything that is greater. And why do people encounter difficulties? Why are they overwhelmed by doubts when performing spiritual practices, deep, real prayers, true prayers, frank prayers, when a person does not want matter or health, when he does not ask for personal benefits from the genies, and when he really appeals to God, when he wholeheartedly strives to be connected with that world, he seeks God's love. When he himself is disposed to this love, and he is the source of this love, then he receives a response. But then, Satan's power over him is lost, and his consciousness is afraid of this, and it does everything. It does not let him go into this deep prayer by distracting him with thoughts, or it immediately begins to control him, while deep prayer as well as practice comes from personality. It does not come from consciousness. Consciousness is always against, but consciousness immediately begins to do what? To criticize, to say you are unable to do anything. And is there really a spiritual world at all? Does God exist? Look at the world you live in, and the like. Yet, you live in this world just because you listen to your consciousness. You see only evil, because evil suppresses you and eats you from within. Isn't that so? It makes a person doubt the most important and the most essential thing, what he came into this world for. It makes him doubt life. But it immediately says that consciousness does not die after death. Well, there cannot be death for consciousness. It's like either a dream or a transition to another state. Instead of life to a subpersonality.
Igor Mikhailovich, regarding doubts that the system gives rise to, the point is that now in the Allatra movement, we also have a situation when certain rumors are spread in the movement. And some people, let's say, spread these rumors. Others protect Allatra, while many people are silent.
Allatra is God's love, while a movement is a movement. Well, let's talk about this too, because this fact exists. The same happens both in people's consciousness and in the unification of people. Whatever good or the best people unite on. In any unification, there are always those who are against it. There are always those who oppose it. Always. And it doesn't matter what we take. Let's take the simplest thing. People unite in order to create a large orchestra or a choir, right? And what begins there? Somebody's violin goes out of tune. Someone is singing off key. Somebody has hoarse voice. Isn't that so?
Yes.
People begin to criticize one another. Because they live by what? They live by what is worldly, ordinary, and satanic. Allatra is also united. Let's say by people, united with different purposes. Let's just explain right away, so that there is an understanding. There is the Allatra movement, the Allatra movement, the purpose of which is to make the world a little better, to help us figure out some things for ourselves, right? A good wave is being risen today regarding a creative and constructive society.
Yes.
There are a lot of projects aimed at the revival of forgotten moral and ethical human principles, at the awakening of something good and humane in our society, at least a little bit. Creation of a creative and constructive society in the form of a question, right?
Yes.
Do we need it or not? But in Allatra an idea was born. A right idea, very good one. And timely idea. Everyone understands that the consumer order comes to its end. It cannot exist like this any further. Politicians and economists speak about it. Everyone understands and knows that. Man cannot be evolved to a man for so many thousands of years, especially in the situation we are entering into, because we are actually entering into an acute situation. You and I mentioned earlier that at the very top they state that we need to unite, meaning people understand that something needs to be done. So an idea was born in the movement about the creation of a constructive society with high moral values, moral and ethical values,
Ethical.
with a spiritual vector of development, so as to, let's say, stop deceiving and robbing one another, and so that we live like human beings, meaning humankind deserves this. Moreover, there is a room for development, and the number of people, let's say, can be multiplied several times, and there will be enough room for everyone. It's a wonderful, great idea. But this is a movement that includes atheists and representatives of various religions, or the ones who consider themselves representatives of religion. There are also those who, let's say, profess Allatra in its true meaning. But those who profess Allatra in the true meaning are merely participants in the Allatra movement. They were simply the initiators of the movement creation. However, the movement has grown into its own trend. And it's interesting that the system is trying, let's say, to put this stigma, to stigmatize those spiritual forces that literally contribute to the awakening of people and that assist humanity. And this spiritual part of the participants, I emphasize, of the participants of the movement itself, gets stuck in the system's throat, in the literal sense of the word. The system cannot swallow this, and what does it send? Thoughts, doubts, and a game begins around the movement. This movement isn't good. There is something wrong with it. Excuse me, there are those who use, let's say, unspiritual things. We are now talking about the movement of people, about the Allatra movement. Excuse me, the Allatra movement includes both atheists and all people in the world, right?
Yes.
And immediately there appear those who claim that it is unspiritual, a paradox.
Exactly.
And those people state this, who absolutely do not understand the spiritual, and literally do not strive there. It is easier and more convenient for them to be slaves of the system, but they begin to blame the entire movement. Wait a minute. And why stigmatize the whole movement? Because there are some participants who profess, let's say, the spiritual trend of their own development, well, if we put it in a civilized way, right? Let us then stigmatize Christians or Muslims or Jews who are also members of the movement, because there are many, let's say, dark spots in their religions. Well, isn't that so? What does the movement have to do with it? If they want to stigmatize someone, I'm telling this to demons, well, stigmatize someone specifically. Don't apply this to the whole movement. Yet what do? Again, just as the system in the head, right? Throws in all sorts of bad thoughts, staggers a person so that he, excuse me, would stumble, fall and doubt. It works this way. In the same way, it works here too.
It shatters them.
And everything goes stealthily, behind the backs. Some anti-movements are created. You know, this reminds me of how during the formation of the Soviet Union, conspirators distributed leaflets, whispered somewhere around corners. However, they aspired to some kind of revolution. Revolutionaries, let's put it this way, in the negative sense of this word. The ones who don't aspire to freedom, but who try to destroy something good. Guys, before you destroy something, you have to build something. I'll put it this way. While you've raised the right issue, And we can talk about this too, because we're absolutely open to dialogue and to everything else. So,
I'm very grateful for this openness because indeed, only honesty and only truth can destroy any manipulations.
it's true. We have nothing to hide at all. We are absolutely open.
The system acts secretly after all, and it even offers people not to bring this up, let's say, not to discuss this in mass.
To keep silent.
Yes, to keep silent,
Wait a minute.
so as not to undermine the choice of others.
Wait, let's talk about this as well. After all, how do they reason that something is going wrong, something is hidden, and there is no truth, and they immediately act secretly and stealthily destabilize those who are already destabilized? The ones who stand and who are faithful to God don't care about all these stories.
Yes.
They laugh because they understand. Those who are really in the movement and who understand what the movement is, because they are precisely this movement. Well, how can you tell me that I am doing something bad if I am doing something good? Well, how can I believe that? No. Those people stagger who don't do anything.
Lazy people, right?
Of course, these are the stones by the road, which are supposedly in the movement. We're near such kind of little satellites. Isn't that so?
It is.
If a person is in the movement and he himself takes part, he sees everything and he participates, if they come and tell him, he won't listen to them. Nevertheless, the system is trying to destabilize. It is trying to destroy. Why? A simple question. Because Alatra is dangerous for the system itself. If we remove Alatra now, then everything will accelerate, and everybody knows this. That's the paradox. Everyone knows
Yes.
that today it is the only hope of humankind. But again, to set one's hopes on Alatra, you are the only hope for our humankind, and not Alatra. Because what does Alatra come down to in the understanding? How does consciousness form this understanding? Alatra is something, right? Somewhere. Or the Alatra book. Guys, what can a book do if it's just lying on the table? Nothing. While you can, and can do a lot.
Alatra is in everyone, yes.
If Alatra is inside, and you understand its essence, and you are faithful to God, you can do much, much more than it even seems to you. Even your actors in the head are not aware what you're capable of. But remember, my friend, they will do everything so that you wouldn't succeed, wouldn't reveal your potential, wouldn't become a human. Because for them, for these actors, it is slavery. Although, in fact, they should have been a tool. But you know, it's scary when slaves become feudal lords. But this is what happened to humankind. Consciousness began to dominate personality. Isn't that a paradox? The lowest form, the most lowest one that can exist, which has consciousness, well, consciousness with intelligence, let's put it this way, begins to dictate the higher form, personality, and it simply nips it in the bud. It does not allow it to develop. For instance, imagine a cocoon that kills a caterpillar, does not allow it to become a butterfly. Is this a normal cocoon? But why is that normal with us? Why does a cocoon kill a butterfly?
Due to doubts, first and foremost, in the heads of people too.
Well, the desire of
Yes.
what is wrong, doubts, thirst for magic.
Igor Mikhailovich, speaking about those rumors, may I voice some of them?
We have nothing to hide at all. And everyone knows this in the movement. Who has not read this? After all, excuse me, such gossip and all kinds of bad things spread at lightning speed. Again, I'm curious about something else. Why are people silent? Well, if you're so honest and righteous, and these rumors or something else comes to you, just speak up. Such and such fellow has sent me this. Isn't that so? And in group chats, in group communication, ask him a question. Why are you doing this? Are there not enough actors in the head who throw in doubts since you also help? It's all like, look what is written or said there. It's funny, but it's true. People are like little children in a sandbox. You yourself are doing everything in that very movement. Don't you see the truth? Well, let's go through them.
One of, let's say, the first rumors that is spread secretly in some closed chats or closed groups, newsletters, is that there is a certain group that is engaged in ancient practices of love, which basically contribute to bringing power to this world. And consciousness doesn't agree with that. It says that it is not spiritual.
Not spiritual.
It's not.
And wrong.
Consciousness says.
But guys, we've already talked about this, let's repeat it for our friends. There are two sources of power. In the invisible world, let's put it so. One which is inside the sphere, and the other one is outside. In order for people to get a certain power, to change something, let's say on a metaphysical level, they use only two sources. One is to take someone's life. And this life is energy. They call it prana in the East. It is the energy of life, by means of which one can be partially replenished and use this power to dominate the demons in the heads of other people and to strengthen one's own demons. Well, I'll give you a simple example so you can understand. Who does your consciousness worship? Well, to be honest, the oligarchs. Well, no lies, isn't it so? Because they can do anything and you're afraid of them. And they indeed can do a lot. They have a lot of money, a lot of mercenaries. So try to step on a foot or spit in the face of some oligarch. After all, everyone knows how it will end, so everyone is scared. To become strong, to rule the world, you need the devil to be on your side. You need your demon in the head to be stronger than the demons of those who worship you. The ninth circle. You see, we've returned to it again today. They use these practices. Excuse me, they kill babies. Cut the bellies of pregnant women. We talked about this. What for? For people to suffer, so that energy surge would be bigger. It's physics. Well, guys, where's your resentment against this? So we are talking about it again. Because a person takes someone's life, he tortures, he torments so that to become richer and stronger. And there's no resentment. To rule the world, to rule you, and there's no resentment. They even treat it with fear, because demons are afraid in their heads. No, we won't think about this, we don't need it. Let's better discuss Alatra. Because it's unspiritual there. And we don't talk about those guys at all. Is that right? That's what I'm talking about. Whereas, let's discuss Alatra. What will we discuss? Well, let's put it this way. There's a group of people who use ancient practices of love. These practices are specific, but they've existed for centuries. We once talked about the Alat sisters, and the one who is not lazy, he found confirmation about this, that until now, in the gardens of the Alat sisters, there are ceremonies aimed at obtaining these powers, which they obtained in such an unspiritual way. They loved each other and used their bodies as tools. Isn't that so? Without killing anyone, without taking away from anyone, they brought in power from outside. I mean, from beyond the sphere. And this power gave people, it precisely gave the power to oppose demons as well as demons in the head. It gave spiritual power to people, and it still gives. And the most interesting thing is that many people feel this power, use this power, hunt and thirst for it, and immediately discuss that it is unspiritual. Guys, come on, stop lying. Let me just explain this. To everyone who doesn't understand, every human being is given just enough power to gain eternal life. But we spend it in the wrong direction. The world has become much tougher, the devil has become much stronger, and under these conditions, again, let's put everything aside and look from a purely mathematical standpoint, right? What do you need to resist the one who is stronger? Extra power. Do you agree with that, my friends? Where will you get it? Each of you doesn't refuse help when you get it. Well, I mean those who stand on the spiritual path, who try to come to the spiritual world from the bottom of their hearts, to come into contact with Allah, with God, those who love, who are loving God. By receiving the additional power of love, they become stronger and feel this power. They feel this resonance. Isn't that so? It is, because it is the help to gain life. And literally a couple of minutes after, a meditation, prayer, or a spiritual practice, having felt and experienced it all, he receives from a good friend a certain newsletter, or something like, it's spiritual, unspiritual, and immediately doubts in his head begin to appear, right? I mean, the actors in his head tell him, well, it's unspiritual. Guys, why do you care? Is someone forcing you to do this? Does it somehow affect your life in a bad way? I'll put it simpler. Let me give you an example to dispel your concern about spirituality, non-spirituality. And you will think about it. Let's just be honest, friends. Well, were you not lying? We're telling the truth right now. Why don't you tell yourself the truth? I will tell you something you haven't been thinking about at all. Thousands of children are dying from hunger today. It's true. And thousands of children are dying right now because they do not have drinking water. Yes, you do not know them, you do not see them. They're not your children, and they are not you, but they are our children. They are children of our humankind, children of our human society. You are part of this society after all. And what are you doing? You buy a lot of food that gets spoiled and you throw it away. You wash the floors with drinking water and flush it in the toilets. Or am I wrong? While the children are dying of thirst, do you know what the actors will begin to say now? Yes, we need to help those children. And look how these actors led them astray. Who is spiritual or unspiritual? Are you spiritual in this regard? Do you act humanly? And immediately consciousness will explain, this doesn't depend on me. Look at what everything is like in this world. While those who spend their life, time, energy and attention on getting a drop of this life-giving water for you, who give you crutches when you stumble, who push you, and you agree that this is unspiritual, don't you? At the time when you need help, they help you. They are your guides in the darkness you are in now. Is this unspiritual? Whereas the ninth circle, this is spiritual, this is normal. Look how simple this is. You just shouldn't lie.
This is also...
Isn't that so?
Yes.
I'll give you one more simple, associative example, not in order to convince you, but for you to understand at least something. Those who try to destabilize you when you are already unstable, they are like those close friends, the best of the best. After all, they always pretend to be friends.
Exactly.
Just imagine that you and such best friend of yours, God forbid, decided to cross the river. It is winter, it is cold, and you fell through the ice into an ice hole. It's cold and frosty outside. You're trying to get out. It is slippery. You have heavy clothes, and this friend, who is drowning himself, clings to you and pulls you down. He's saving you, my friends. After all, he is doing this out of sincere motives. You in wet clothes are getting out of water where it is +1 degree Celsius, into the cold where it is -20 degrees, being far from people. After all, before you reach them, you may get sick or die, God forbid. While in the water it is plus 1 degree. Is He saving you? Thus they are similar to these friends of yours, who themselves are drowning in the ice hole where it is plus 1 degree, so that you don't get out in the cold. Or am I wrong? Answer yourself honestly. But the worst thing is that these shaky ones, having listened to the lie, themselves begin to grab their own friends and pull them deeper into the ice hole. And then they say that there is something dishonest in Alatra. We must find it.
Yes.
And what is dishonest there, except you? Alatra is us. You, we, all of us. We are precisely Alatra as a movement. And if there is something dishonest there, then it is only in people.
Igor Mikhailovich, there is another question. Let's say it's not even a question. What consciousness presents as an argument in the minds of some doubters is the so-called confession of a former Galiar.
You know, they also told me about this. I didn't read it myself. I was too lazy, to be honest. But it's always funny to me. A confession of a former Galiar. My friends, there is no such thing as a former Galiar. Galiar is someone who serves God. He is a warrior of light. He is sincere and completely devoted to the service to the spiritual world. He can't be a former one, just as an angel cannot fall. Like the devil is a former angel, he fell. It is all work of the mind. These are actors in the head. And in this case, regarding this actor of the former Galiar, so to speak, you know, I'll answer you with an association, if you don't mind. Imagine a man with a high conceit that he is an outstanding athlete. He had friends whom he considered less athletic, and they decided to enter the Institute of Sports together, for example. And this outstanding athlete fails the very first physical education exam and fails it completely at that. Naturally, he doesn't get anywhere, but he immediately begins to tell everyone, I, as a graduate of this university of sports, as a master, I want to tell you that there are absolutely incompetent professors. They don't teach anything. It's just a stupid university. You're wasting time. Don't go there. I warn you. As a master of this university, as a former pupil, a former student, this is absolutely the same. A person who had never had any relation to Galiarship, who simply failed his first exam in physical education, let's put it this way, because of his egoism, because of his pridefulness, first and foremost, but he got filled with great hatred, because those whom this person considered unworthy became Galiars, while he did not. And that's the point. And the evil that arose in him is the evil that is primarily directed against himself, against the awareness of his own worthlessness. But does consciousness tell anyone that he is not worthy, that he is lazy, that he is proudling? Consciousness speaks and rebels only when a person stands on the spiritual path. Isn't that so? When a person begins to achieve something in the spiritual, then consciousness rebels against him. And when a person does stupidities, does evil, consciousness always justifies. Well, if you deceive someone, if you exaggerate, if you lie, if you lead people astray from the truth, then you're great. You try hard for yourself. Everyone acts like that. Well, as usual. What's bad is that those shaky ones, hearing that there was a former Galiar in the movement, how is that? This is wrong. And what about me? Wait, but I have a simple question. Excuse me, is there recruitment of galliars open anywhere. A simple question for you, friends, where can I sign up? In order to become a galliar, this must be earned. And it's not so simple. Whereas we see the work of these people every day. You know, I'll tell you honestly, if we stop their work now, even for a short period of time, believe me, your consciousness will put you on your knees before them so that they continue their work. But they are not demons, I mean galliars, for you to kneel before them. Therefore, guys, in everything there is a red line, up to which you can play. We ourselves don't mind fun. Humor. We often use humor. You know, they say that one can take to drink in this world without humor, but drinking is a sin that leads to death. So let's stop at humor. But my friends, do not cross the red line. Even in your thoughts, this will have an impact. I'm not scaring or warning you. And for those who doubt, we can demonstrate this if you want. And you will see in numbers what will happen in this world. And regardless of whether your consciousness believes it or not, there are things that are beyond your mind. Therefore, stay with your doubts and with everything else behind the red line. And do not let your demons push you over this line. It is dangerous there. There is a certain line for everything. And one shouldn't blaspheme against the holy and God.
It's just said that from ancient times it was described what this danger for people consists in particular, that everything living and everything real in this world is supported by God's light, by the light of God's love. It was said that if God's grace leaves this world, then it will perish immediately.
That's what will happen. And I agree with this 100%. Therefore, our task, as normal people, of society as a whole, is to do everything so that the grace of God doesn't leave this world after all. And it depends on each of you, my friends. And these are not jokes, these are not games. Consciousness is well versed in mathematics, physics, the exact sciences, accounting, in many things, in life relationships, in fashion, in many things, but not in life. And you know this perfectly well. Therefore, my friends, let's live not only by prompts of consciousness, but also by the world of feelings, the spiritual world, and not forget about the main thing, who you are and what are you here for, right? People are here not in order to die, but in order to gain life. Never forget about this. And you, any of you, my friends, are first and foremost a potential angel, and not a slave to little demons. Remember that. You are a human, and a human must sound dignified, and it can sound dignified only when he is a feudal lord, and demons in his head are his servants, but not the other way around. If it's the other way around, then a human should already be written with a small letter in relations to such slaves. Do not be them, ever. Do not serve Satan. This is a sin.
Indeed, as you said, the system comes in through a friendly relationship, through friendship. At first, everything is good. They talk about joint activities.
Of course.
And then the following questions are raised. Are you sure that everything is that pure in Allatra? Are you sure about how the Allatra movement is organized? What do you think? Where is it funded from?
Where is it funded from is the most painful question for them, right? Guys, there is another point that I like. We get together. There is some project, we are doing something in the movement, we chipped in and did it together. After all, everyone participates, everyone sees, and they themselves take some financial part in the implementation of this project. And then such destabilizing information comes in. And they say, where do they get the finances? Right? Well, guys, you yourself finance it, do it and take part in it. Well, isn't it funny to ask? Where does the money come from? The money comes precisely from our own investments. We do everything ourselves. It's funny.
But there is also...
And as for the fact that there is something dishonest and doubtful, consciousness always doubts, even you. Are you spiritual enough? Especially at the beginning. We'll talk about this a bit later.
Also, there is a frequent argument that somehow all this, somehow everything in Allatra is too perfect.
Too good.
Somehow too good.
Too perfect.
And even if there is some flaw found, then they say, oh yes, after all, they are volunteers, right? Maybe not a sect after all. Meaning...
Guys, again, a sect or not a sect, what's the difference? No matter what anyone call us. I gave an example about a fireman, right? This is ridiculous.
Exactly.
I'll put it simpler. If someone likes, they can call sectarians a certain group of people, precisely this very group, which is engaged in non-spiritual practices of obtaining power. Let's put it this way, okay? As well as those who are joined them and follow the spiritual path. Fine, those one you can call sectarians if you want to. But what does this have to do with the movement? Are atheists also sectarians? Or other people? After all, the movement includes a lot of people. What do they have to do with this? You should distinguish somehow. Right?
A sect of kind people.
Say that there are sectarians in the movement. I can understand this already if you put it this way, okay? That's right, there are sectarians, guys. We have representatives of different sects. So what's wrong with that? On the contrary, this is good.
A sect of kind people.
Of course.
Igor Mikhailovich, but there is also...
And the alive.
And the alive.
And this is wonderful.
Igor Mikhailovich, there are also rumors that are being spread about you.
But how else can it be? There should be a lot of rumors against me. This is a powerful argument from the system.
Yes, one of these rumors is that you have a certain real estate in the Holosivsky district.
Real estate in Holosivsky district. But this is good after all. Guys, you know, that's funny to be honest. I've never talked about it. But I've already heard several times, and Tatiana is now talking about my real estate as well. It is an image that your consciousness draws you, that I should live in a hut or a cave somewhere in the woods and eat grasshoppers. Or actually, no, it is not right to eat grasshoppers. They're alive, it is unspiritual. I must feed on the sun. Guys, I like hamburgers. Well, honestly, I like the same food as most people. I live under a roof with walls. By the way, you do not live in caves either. I'm just an ordinary person, just like you, and in the same conditions. Isn't that right? Only there's a slight difference. You know in what? I'll be honest with you. I didn't tell you about this, but I'll tell you, so that there will be no questions. I've worked my whole life. I was making good money, and had more than enough. So, when we began to create Allatra, 90%, I'm telling you honestly, 90% of everything I've earned, I gave to build these premises for you. And much more, and not just these premises. We have enough of them. Not enough, we need more. Well, it's sort of, we're out of money, we'll make money and buy it. How can it be otherwise? 10% I've kept for a living, and all kinds of... I honestly divided the amount, 90% for you and 10% for me. I don't walk. I have a good car. Guys, do I have to ride a bike? Well, you know, it is already, let's say, sport, hard work, circumstances, a lot of injuries to this body. You see, I'm already too lazy to pedal. I'll be honest with you, so I'm driving a normal car. Why shouldn't I drive a normal car? Do you know how they will argue now? Somewhere people, kids, starve. While I drive a normal car, this is unspiritual. Well, isn't it so? Is this spiritual or unspiritual? A simple question. I've earned money with my own hands. Today, as a participant of the movement, I'm doing everything that depends on me, so that we can create such a creative and constructive society in which there wouldn't be, let's say, hungry, and even better, sick people, people who have misfortune. So we can try to do this, to reduce grief in this world. That's what I'm doing. I'm spending my time and energy on this. In no case do I boast, my friends, and I urge no one to repeat and do what I did. Remember, I'm not calling for this. Why did I do that? Because I know that it is the right thing to do, because I know that I do not need more. I have enough. For a roof over my head, for a good car, and for a hamburger. Why not? I do not like to feed on the sun. Well, honestly, I'm not a plant.
Yes, thank you, Igor Mikhailovich. There is also a question. I don't even want to ask it, but I will voice that.
Voice it.
There is such a rumor that you have a gun, for example, that this is somehow unspiritual.
You know, I've been asked several times. People say, well, there are rumors that you have a gun. Yes, guys, not just a gun. I'm actually a hunter and a fisherman. Well, to be honest, as a hunter or as a fisherman. Anyway, I'm not good at football on Ahriman's field, to be honest. Animals run away. I cannot catch a fish, but I tried. Surely I have it. And why shouldn't I have it? Is it unspiritual to kill animals? How can those who every day eat meat, sausage or anything else discuss me for shooting animals? Well, I do understand there's no meat in modern sausage, or there is in rare cases, but still, it should be there, at least nominally, right? Do you eat meat? Wasn't it alive? You're liars.
And accomplices.
And simply accomplices.
Yes.
Guys, if I worked at a meat packing plant, would I also do unspiritual things? Preparing, let's say, meat for you which you will eat later on. It's a job. Well, isn't it so?
Yes.
How many lies, right? And how consciousness twists this. A simple question. They immediately find something to make a person doubt and falter. Well, this is... And why does a person, as personality, allow these doubts to enter? I'm not speaking about myself. You can throw bricks at me as much as you like, for God's sake. If we are actually talking about the bricks, then the transagency would be engaged in this. Post office won't accept them. You should take it into account. And, in general, why do you, my friends, allow demons in your head to dictate to you? Because everyone understands and knows how acute the situation is. And I don't scare you. I state a fact. And I'm not the only one talking about this. A short while ago, yes, I was the only one talking. Then we started talking together. Now there's a lot of us talking about this. And now you see even those who were against what we talked about joined in. And we understand this and know this. And taking all this into account, we allow actors in our consciousness to dictate to us exactly the opposite of what we need. That's what is really unspiritual, guys. Don't listen to these actors and don't pay for anything that hinders you. Any doubt that comes in your head. I don't take any doubts about Allatra or anything else. Doubts in the spiritual world. Doubts about performing spiritual practices or anything else. Or doubts that you can attain life. Or that you can come into contact with the spiritual world. These doubts should not be paid by you. It is like using poison. It is harmful to health.
Yes.
You shouldn't do it. This is unspiritual. That's what a sin is. To doubt God. There is no greater sin.
I recalled that in the Bible it is said, "He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways." These are exactly thoughts, doubts, and the actors in the
Of
head.
course.
Igor Mikhailovich, it's just also interesting what all this actually leads to. Those people who agreed and who listened to these doubts, what is the further scheme? What does consciousness say? It already says that I perceive Allatra partially, that is, I accept Allatra partially, but partially not. Or the thoughts of this kind arise in people's heads that, well, in Allatra there are also grains of truth, as well as in other religions. And before that,
Allatra is not a religion. And there are also grains of truth. This is inappropriate and has no relation to Allatra. Guys, Allatra is a complete set that is given for your use, absolutely free of charge. You can do with it whatever you like. You can insult, call it names or doubt. Or you can take it and start living. Everything is given to you. The main thing is to stop lying to yourself. Everything starts with honesty and openness. And we have absolutely nothing to hide. You see, why should I be embarrassed? In this world, guys, the only thing I can be embarrassed about. I was just thinking, what can I be embarrassed about in this world?
probably about nothing, because embarrassment originates from bar.
Well, embarrassment originates from bar.
A person is confined by the system's bars.
There is nothing I can be embarrassed about, nothing. I went through all the options in my head. Those parasites are silent. They will remain hungry today for not telling me, right?
Yes.
That's how you should deal with them if they don't give you information on time. Leave them hungry. Or add the workload to them, to the actors in the head, and everything will be fine. I wanted to say the only thing I can be embarrassed about is probably to go out naked to a square. And you know I don't care about the opinions of those who will look at me. I understand that I'm not Schwarzenegger, so what? These are the problems of those who are looking at me. Why should I care? What to be embarrassed about in this world? Except for the stupid things we do. Well, again, the doing of stupid things often comes from the fact that we got distracted and the actors got freedom. Therefore, it is they who should be embarrassed. It is they who do them by means of our bodies. But we also use bodies. So if you got distracted and they used it and they did stupid things, these are their problems. And it's they who should discuss this.
Igor Mikhailovich, regarding partially accepting or not accepting Allatra, because people think that I will use certain tools.
I'll put it simply. It means that they will live partially. They will live with one foot, but not with the other one. This is funny, guys. I partially accept God's love, and partially I do not accept it. And who will accept you then? A simple question. Again, this comes from a lie, from a falsehood. Do you know why? Because people feel this resonance that is coming, this power of love that there is. Again, thanks to these groups that engage in absolutely non-spiritual things, the ancient practices that always existed, is like the Alat sisters and many others, right? Like Sophia's group. They engage in things that are so unspiritual that when you feel this, the demons in your head fall silent. This brings you so close to the spiritual world that there is nothing inside except joy. So shall we accept this partially? These are your problems. Don't accept it at all if you like. Nobody forces anyone. A person has the right to live and has the right to serve Satan. This is the right of a person.
Igor Mikhailovich, and who is a truly spiritual person? After all, how consciousness draws.
The alive one. A truly spiritual person is one who is alive. I'll put it simply, the one who has nothing to be embarrassed about. The one who understands that this world is temporary, and his body is temporary and everything is temporary, while he has life inside, life eternal. The one who is filled with God's love, the one who gives 90% of his love, his attention, and his power to the spiritual world, and receives much more, and returns it again. And he lives in such a cycle, lives here and now. That one shouldn't be afraid of death, For that one, life has already begun, while consciousness tells you and lies to you that this is difficult. There is nothing difficult, my friends. This is the simplest thing that can be. But you understand this only when you gain life.
Yes, and this is very valuable and very important because a lot of feedback and a lot of letters were precisely about the spiritual, about how to feel this true life.
Well, how can one not feel it? Well, how can one not live? Do you know what the funniest thing is? That those who have left Alatra cannot part with it. They begin to fight, save someone, because they feel it. In addition, they watch our videos, they feel this response. But Satan has power over them. Whereas consciousness says, what's Satan? Satan doesn't exist. After all, they possess such a serious intelligence. Everything is so reasonably laid out for them. Then why is it so sad inside? And why is it so joyful when you feel love? True love. Is it possible to replace it with anything? They simply... It's like a game for them, you know? Like sporting interest, like a game. They're mired in this and start trying to save others, because some of them, thought that they were kicked out of the movement. But did anyone kick anyone out of here? They went out themselves. They closed the door before themselves, and now they are knocking on it.
And this is paradoxical, because the one who
This is funny.
really comes into contact with Alatra, then this is already forever.
This is forever. Even if a person comes into contact with God's love at least once, the longing will be eternal. It's impossible to forget this. Yes, consciousness gets stronger by many times. It begins to do anything, begins to drive into disbelief, in distrust, in doubt, makes people do tremendously stupid things, simply serve Satan. People can stoop to anything in their meanness and inhumanness, to the dictation of these actors who really don't want to release this goat that gives milk and feeds these actors. They don't want to. These slaves who became feudal lords don't want to become slaves again. Well, they don't want to. They're fighting for power, it's understandable. This is just consciousness, merely actors. But what do you have to do with that? And everyone who has come into contact with this love at least once feels it and experiences a terrible longing for it. Do you know how the alive is different from the dead? Yes? The alive, or even a potentially alive, he feels unity, he feels life, he feels love inside. Now, if you close your eyes and just look inside, relax and look, what do you feel? Vibrations of life. This is real, living, huge and boundless. And what do those who serve Satan feel? The abyss and darkness. Personality feels nothing at all. It feels the abyss. And the worst thing is loneliness. And this is really so, because it will be dumped, it will be deceived. It will stay only with these actors for centuries. And doesn't a person know this? Doesn't he really feel this? Liars and hypocrites, stop lying to yourself. Look inside yourself, honestly. You have no enemies except yourself. This is true, and you know this.
Indeed, the system acts solely for each person,
Of course.
inside himself, and makes him search for these enemies somewhere in the external, in another person.
The worst enemy is inside a person, but this enemy is so cunning, just like the left essence, which is trying to shift this fear, this enmity, this understanding from personality that there is a danger and a threat. It is trying to shift this threat on the external factor, meaning on someone or something. Let's say, on Alatra. They're against Alatra, for example, against Islam, against Christianity, Buddhism, or something else. Well, isn't that so? That is against God. And then they say the devil rebelled against God, yes? And then fell, and God is at war with him. This is ridiculous.
This is also interesting. I've recalled how the Holy Fathers described how the devil conducts his warfare. Indeed, at this initial stage, he approaches the lazy, saying that this is very difficult, and throws all sorts of difficulties on them, so that the person understands that, oh, since it's so difficult now, then what will it be like when I move further along the path?
Oh, surely.
And the key point is that he approaches those who are really lazy and negligent, those who lead them astray with doubts.
To those who doubt. To those who doubt and who are shaky. And I'll put it this way. If a person lived an ordinary life, a simple life, an ordinary human life, and something lit up in him, and he embarked on the spiritual path, and if an attack starts against him, then this is a sign that you are worth something. The system wouldn't invest in destabilizing you, driving you into doubts, sadness, sorrow, creating around you a total chaos and a lot of problems in order to drive you into the stall of a slave, of a sheep. If it does this, then you have a huge chance to become a feudal lord over these actors, to gain life. This is true after all.
Yes. And at this moment, when the system, let's say, thickens over people and makes them believe that this is already their loss, that this is a wrong moment to be in spirit.
It doesn't make people believe. It wants people to believe. And it is up to a person to choose whether to believe or not. And yet again, it's easy enough to smash it all to smithereens. After all, every person, even when these thoughts come to him, when they seethe and boil in him, he still observes this from the outside. Yes, by investing his attention he gets into the thick of things, he experiences emotions, fears, denial, doubt. But on the other hand, he remains an external observer. It is enough to stop and say no. I am not financing this, because it's very simple. Where you put your attention, that's what gets implemented, my friend. If you invest in doubts, you will be full of doubts. You get what you buy. And attention is your means. So why do you need to buy doubts, listen to actors and obey no one knows who programs, little imps? Maybe you should invest attention in love, joy, into the real and eternal, in this resonance, in real life. After all, it is you who decides, and how can you doubt whether you exist or not? After all, you do exist, you do feel. Consciousness tells you, oh, this should be understood. Images are needed. There are images in three-dimensionality, but you won't stay in three-dimensionality anyway. The body is like a cocoon, it ends, and very quickly, and it wears out like any clothes. And you're released. What is the point? Where do you get after you leave your body? Into life or into nowhere? Into a subpersonality. Only you decide. No one else. Neither God, nor the devil, or any of their assistants or accomplices can do this instead of you. Yes, the system tries to make you their feed after death too, but this is your choice after all. How can a person be forced to die if he wants to live? If a person is full of love and strives for it, for this love, how can he be forced to doubt that love exists?
And people already feel this, that there is love, and understand what true love is. They come into contact with it.
And what power is, right?
Yes.
And look, there are rules of the game that no one can break. Consciousness, the actors, does nothing. It only offers. And then with our choice, we respond to his suggestions, and chemistry, physics, and everything else begins to develop. Seas, hormones begin to play. There is disagreement, agreement, and the like, while it merely throws in a little thought, and we either accept it or not. But it is always active, and always tries to get in from various sides and seize our attention, because it is food for it. It is like, we take millet, let's say, and pour it for the birds, and they fly in from all sides and eat, and here's the paradox. The more you pour, the more they fly in, and same is here. The more wasteful you are, the more they attack you. While the spiritual world simply is, and you can go to it yourself. Satan comes himself, whereas to the spiritual world you need to go yourselves, and go there by stepping over Satan. That's how it should be. There is no other way.
Igor Mikhailovich, once you mentioned that good should also be organized, let's say, and this is especially...
But how else can it be, of course? Look how well evil is organized, how it is consolidated. After all, a very small amount of evil dominates the whole society. This is indeed so. The ninth circle is very small. In fact, there are only a few of them if we look at the society as a whole, but it dictates to all humanity. And humanity worships it. Evil is well organized, and all these little hotbeds of its manifestation we observe anywhere and everywhere, how quickly and well it gets organized. Why wouldn't the good get organized? A simple question.
People ask themselves a question, what contributes to this organization, this unification in the context of...
Well, this is a three-dimensional world. Everything is very simple here. There is no need to invent a bicycle when it already exists, right? The same tools, but with a different focus. If evil is always aimed at separation, at greed, then the same tools can be used for unification, for the good, for love, for honesty and justice.
The point is that building a creative and constructive society, which is actually the goal that the Allatra movement sets itself.
Well, I would put it this way. To date, the main goal of the Allatra movement should be not in building a creative and constructive society, but first of all, we need to find out, does humanity need this? Or does humanity not want this creative and constructive society? After all, the Allatra movement is just a small part of the huge humanity. Do people want this creative and constructive society? Do they want the changes? That's the main goal, to find this out. If people want this, if they strive for this, if they want to unite and want changes, if they want to stop living the way they live and they want to live better and the way the human really deserves to live, how humanity deserves to live in the modern world, then yes, but again, it is not Allatra who should decide what the creative and constructive society will be like. It is humanity who should decide this, while we, as usual, merely set a precedent and develop all this. I would even say, for starters, we raised the question with you today about doubts about this, mistrust towards Allatra and the like. I would suggest all participants of the movement to honestly and openly answer, do we need the Allatra movement in general? Answer yourself and answer each other honestly and in all sincerity. Do we need the movement that we do not respect? And I didn't misspeak. If we allow someone to interfere in our movement, if we allow to destabilize it, to take advantage of it, to insult us, spit in our faces, as of participants of the movement, then why do we need such a movement? If we were fans of some sports club and someone insulted it, what would we do? Because this is our sports club, we support it. Whereas we do not support Allatra, that means it is not ours. Since this is not ours, maybe it is not necessary. If we doubt what we are doing, maybe we shouldn't do it. Even in this respect, if we As participants of the entire movement, make a decision why we are spending time on it, and why do we need this alatra, and just disband it, forget it and walk away. But I'll tell you that for me personally, as for a human being, this will free up a lot of time. Look at these positive aspects. You will have a lot of free time. You will have something to do. Think it over, friends. Maybe we do not need it.
The answer from the other side of the screen is that we need the movement, but
Not everyone needs it, but everyone understands what alatra is. But if we understand, and if we decide to keep it and move further, to implement what alatra is aimed at now, at creation, at everything else, then let's at least stop lying. And if anyone raises such stupid questions, let's call them by their names. For example, John Smith has sent me this. Let's tell everyone. And stop backdoor actions. And stop spreading this filth around each other. Because when you, my friend, accepted this filth, you dirtied everyone. If you accepted this filth, you dirtied yourself. Isn't it so? If we want to make a good society, if we want to make a creative and constructive society, then let's start with the movement. Let's start with ourselves. Let's stop lying to each other, playing in the mud, in the shadows, discussing each other. Let's just openly call things by their names. You see, we're telling the truth without feeling embarrassed. We're telling everything the way it is and what we are accused of. For example, what does it have to do with you or the movement? If we are called sectarians, okay, we are sectarians, participants of the movement. I am proud to be a fireman, because I came like that fireman, right? While your business is already like the business of the one who was in the fire.
I would also like to remind and tell people how actually the system works, why they are silent. After all, what are the arguments? That if I'm in love, if I am a spiritual person, I cannot judge my neighbor, I cannot somehow influence or judge his choice.
And they also judge. And what do? They judge someone and say, it's spiritual or not spiritual, right? Games in spirituality. I'm telling you guys, once again, it is time to stop being children in a sandbox. This is a spiritual mold that we made of sand. Well, that one is not spiritual. Why? This one was in a red bucket and that one was in a blue bucket. The one in the blue bucket is not spiritual, right? Guys, let's grow up. Let's really build a mature organization if we want this. And the movement, it is already being formed as an organization. So with full responsibility, rolling up our sleeves, let's do something and stop doing nonsense. Those who partially believe or partially do not believe in alatra, they will do nothing. Let them go and walk as far as possible from our clearing. We organize everything in our clearing. We make it clean and they come and litter. Litter in our clearing, in clean and beautiful one. And they spit in our faces. And we wipe it and say, we have to be spiritual. Guys, let's think of the greatest of the prophets, Muhammad. Did he allow anyone to litter in his clearing?
Right. Stop playing at spiritual actors, yes.
Of course. Let's stop playing and let's start living. It's just that everything is decided in our heads. If we clean up there, we will clean up everywhere, both inside and outside. Is that right? Well, let's be honest. And we'll make a decision. Do we need alatra or not? If we don't need it, then let everyone mind their own business. Sectarians do their own business. You do your own one. It's just fair and right. Is that right? But if we do decide that we need alatra, and we keep on saving the drowning world, but in reality, Tell me that it is not true. It's true. Who, if not us? A simple question. Doubting liars? Or who? Or obese priests? Answer yourself honestly. That's what we get. Let's look for alive ones. Let's unite and try to survive, not for the sake of ourselves, but for the sake of those who will come after us, so that there is a place to come, and those who can come, so as to please the spiritual world with new angels, not only now but also later. Right? Or let's close it all down and stop this mess. And this is also your choice, to which you have every right, my friends. I am telling you this with absolute honesty and full responsibility, and now you know, all of you know, that I'm telling the truth. You feel this. Consciousness can throw in anything, but if you keep listening to it, and you go against what you feel, then let's close this project. Excuse me for the truth. Well, I have a suggestion. Tatiana, while people think about whether we need a latra or not, let us talk about our sectarians and their problems, about those who are with us, about those who strive with us for the spiritual world, about those who live not by meanness, but by God's love. It's better to discuss this topic. I think my friends will agree. While you think whether you need a latra or not, right? I think people have a lot of questions.
There are questions.
Let's start with them.
It is very joyful that there is an opportunity to voice these questions from people, because at first glance they may seem very simple, but how does the system work?
Well, simple. You see, for someone it is simple, while for someone it is complicated. When a person faces a certain dilemma, when he has a lot of hints from demons in his head, he does not know what to believe, where to invest, when he... Well, it is not quite simple. When a seemingly small thing can be a very serious issue for a person at the moment. So, any help is always a help.
Yes.
Let's try to help our friends with our answers.
Igor Mikhailovich, there are also questions from people who want to stay in this love constantly, naturally. These are questions regarding the deep spiritual practices they perform. Of course, now probably feeling what is happening, I think that the practical experience of feeling is the answer for them. But nevertheless, I will voice the question. The question is as follows. When you are in a spiritual practice, when the spiritual world is revealed, you feel this great love emanating from the spiritual world, then at some point you come to, let's say, some kind of pellicle, to some elastic tension through which a person cannot break through. What is that? What is this tension and how to get through it?
This tension, this little pellicle is caused by even, let's say, a physical sensation, but it can exist only at the first stages of spiritual practice. We have already mentioned that when personality performs spiritual practice, it performs it together with primary consciousness, meaning it's the first stage, and we will always perform it, let's say, relying on primary consciousness. And a person feels that he can go further, but something doesn't let him. Why does it not let him? Because this skill, this experience that a person receives, this degree of freedom, is growing. He receives power, he feels, but cannot go any further because consciousness cannot go there. It is limited in its capabilities. And here you need to let consciousness go. Of course, it doubts, it is kicking. How will you be without me? You will get lost. Well, believe me, in spiritual matters, the worst navigator is consciousness. Therefore, you must let it go and dive. And they say, how can this be done? After all, doubts and fear are sent from consciousness. By attaining God's love. Start loving and stop doubting. Start loving the spiritual world. Become love, and the door will open. It's a very simple path. There is nothing simpler than this. Spiritual resonance with the spiritual world. You just need to be honest. You need to be open. Open for love. And you yourself need to be love. After all, we can generate and send evil into this world, but we can also generate and send love. Isn't that so? We speak about this world. Whereas to the spiritual world, we can send only love. Only joy and happiness. That which we really are as a personality. Part of the spiritual world. It is just the way home. It is always pleasant and easy. Isn't that so?
We were even asked a question how to describe what people feel, how to describe true deepest feelings, what you feel inside, in your chest.
Why describe them? Well, dear people, how can one describe the beauty of the spiritual world with earthly words? How can black paints describe white? Why describe if it is much more pleasant, better, and more useful to feel it, to become it? Isn't it so?
Thank you, Igor Mikhailovich. There is a question regarding defending a spiritual position. People describe a situation that one day some kind of critic suddenly appears in their heads, who all of a sudden begins to make, so to say, unflattering comments about the spiritual, about people who follow the spiritual path. And at this point, it's a matter of honor and dignity for a person to answer this critic inside, to counter-argument all this.
This is a natural reaction, my friends. And these counter-arguments to the actor who insults the holy in the head are exactly the wrong action. But for many, it seems like the right decision. How is that? We have to defend it. If an actor in our head starts blaspheming against everything sacred, we have to put him in his place. Guys, can I just say it in simple terms? This is a scam from another actor in your head. And then a couple of actors in your head will start. One will be for the spiritual, the other one against it. And you will finance this and stand around. Do you know the simplest solution? When you have these thoughts in your head that the spiritual doesn't exist or something else, that you're wasting your time, that you're not going to achieve anything. Guys, stop financing these thoughts. Just stop. The more you fight to defend the truth, let's put it so, the more you will get into this mire, the more it will suck you down, and it will be extremely hard to get out of it later. The right thing to do is, for instance, it tells this to you, while you know and you feel. So at this moment, make your consciousness learn, this actor who begins to blaspheme the holy, or provokes doubts in you that you can do something, or you cannot do it, or that you're worthy or unworthy, even these thoughts mean idleness of mind. Make it work. If consciousness has nothing to solve at work in life, make it learn a language that you do not know, even if you don't need this at all. So find a God-forsaken language, as they say, some ancient or some complex language, and let consciousness learn it. You don't need it at all, but you need to keep your consciousness busy. Pay attention only to this. It tells you, well, are you sure that the spiritual world exists? Such a thought comes in. And you immediately say, okay, we're learning Chinese. And that's it. Leave aside the television, the internet, or some other entertainment, and take a textbook, or excuse me, through the same gadget. You start learning Chinese lessons. When it begins to give up and says, okay, the spiritual world exists, well, you can consider that you have won, you see, at least one step. The topic is not discussed anymore. Consciousness has agreed, the spiritual world exists, that's it, it's already easier. Chinese has helped, right? The second thought comes in, you won't be able to do anything. How will you be able to perform spiritual practice, to achieve anything, or to be in love during the day? Guys, this is very simple. You should be in love and not listen to the actors, and if they distract you and pull you out, Make them learn Chinese language. Or excuse me, do general cleaning of the house. Or make repairs. Peel off the wallpaper and put up the new one. And let consciousness put up until night. If it doesn't want to perform spiritual practices, does it have a choice? It doesn't. The actors should be forced to work. Remember one rule, the rule of this world. When a slave gets a lot of freedom, he begins to mock his master. It is always so. And always the slave will blaspheme at the master and will always do mean things to him. That's how the world is arranged, isn't it so? These actors in your head shouldn't be your feudal lords. They should be your slaves. All you need is to make them serve the spiritual world and serve you as part of the spiritual world. That's the right position. There is no other position. You cannot be friends with them or negotiate with them. The beast, any beast, must serve the human being or be his food product. This is their function. And when we are so far from the spiritual that we feel loneliness and begin to endow an animal with some moral or spiritual qualities, be it our favorite kitten or dog, we forget that it is just a dog and a cat who found on us for food, and we want them to love us. We always do. Is it us who want? Consciousness wants us to be loved, respected. Let us ourselves learn to love and respect. And the beast remains the beast, no matter how good it might be. Even your beloved cat will crawl on plates and shit where he shouldn't. Because he is a beast, first of all. A cat can serve as a toy, an entertainment, or an object, instead of a rosary, you know, to play with its warm wool. Listen to its purring, but don't attach to it that which it or he is not, because it's a beast. Your consciousness is part of the animal world, with great intelligence, an intelligent creature, but a creature. And this creature must serve you as a personality, otherwise you will serve it.
Igor Mikhailovich, there is also such a situation that people shared with us about how the system actually throws in doubts to a person both in himself and naturally doubts about the spiritual. And it seems that the person knows that it is impossible by means of consciousness to evaluate the spiritual path you follow or the spiritual practices which you delve into.
He knows, understands, but he's shaky.
Yes.
And it's still gnawing at him. Why? Because a person at this time is busy with what? He is listening. He is listening, he is thinking, and again we return to the first question, right? We should love. We should strive for the spiritual world and should love. That's where we should invest our attention. And if a person is distracted by thoughts of doubt of something else, again it is all based on pridefulness and selfishness. It concerns him after all, you see? It's, how is that? I cannot, or I won't succeed. It's me. And who says I at that time? Exactly the actor who took your attention. He takes your position, and he lives instead of you, and he sends it all, and he torments you as personality. Well, guys, a slave shouldn't mock the feudal lord. This is wrong. We consider this within the framework and standpoints of three-dimensionality. If we consider it from the spiritual standpoint, the animal doesn't exist at all. It's temporary. There may exist something that always exists, while everything else appears and disappears. Everything that appears and disappears is not spiritual and cannot be such. So the temporal cannot dictate eternal, even potentially eternal. Whereas the personality is potentially eternal, and our task here is to understand that we are personalities. Who am I? I am personality. I am part of the spiritual world, or otherwise. I as personality am part of the animal world who exists temporarily. Then yes, my friends, you will become part of this material world. But this is your choice. Then you will be full of evil. Then it will dominate you. It will eat you. Then you will always be alone. You will be in loneliness and suffering. Is it worthy of you as a human being? And this is true. Today we are talking about the truth, everywhere and in everything. So it is true. And you know that, my friends. No need to play with the spiritual world. You must approach it as an adult person, as a mature personality. Then everything will work out. Whereas any doubts that are thrown in, they have one goal: to destabilize you. This is a lie that is presented to you in a wrapper of truth. You shouldn't unwrap and taste it. You know that this is a lie. So why do you torment yourself? Why do you deprive yourself of a chance to live? Guys, this is wrong. I'll put it simply. The spiritual path is very simple. It is joyful. It is the spiritual path. The spiritual path is happiness and love, regardless of where your body is in suffering, torment. The body may be sick, we may suffer physically, experience pain, or lose health. But as long as we can feel, we live, and we have a chance to gain life eternal. Whereas this world always brings suffering, but we can do the best in it. And we as the movement, as a Latra, strive to make even this world a better place, so that there is less evil and suffering here, isn't it so? It is, so that there is more honesty and truth, respect for each other, mutual assistance to each other. And for this, what we must to begin with? Restore order in ourselves. In order to understand what we are doing and what we are doing this for, we must defeat in ourselves laziness and aggression from these slaves who become feudal lords. This is not right. Slaves must be slaves. And look how the system... I'll go back a little, how slaves appeared 6,000 years ago. Okay? When the dominance of the spiritual world in this world ceased to exist, when the demon got power, what was the first thing it did? It made slaves of people, of angels. The slaves who served whom? The one who entirely served the devil. Look at how it perverts everything and turns it into what we are now living in. And now we are all literally in the slavery of the system itself, in the conditions of our existence. We are not free, and this is wrong. But we can change a lot. We have a huge reserve of strength and capabilities, but only if we want to. But we can only do this together. There are things that concern each person individually. This is our personal spiritual freedom, our right to choose whether to live or die. It is our right to be a feudal lord or a slave. And there are things that concern society as a whole, such as, for example, the consumer order that was created and has dominated this world for 6,000 years. Or, a creative and constructive order that we can rebuild and restore, which dominated before for 6,000 years, when there were no wars and there was mutual respect. We can do everything if we want. The only question is what we want, right? If you feel and if you know the truth, don't listen to the actors who sow doubts in you. Remember one thing: when they sow doubts and you suffer, at this time they grow fat. They just eat. They eat you, my friend. Don't be a fool. Grow up.
The creative and constructive society is a society of truly equal people.
Certainly.
And you said that 6,000 years ago, it all started with the fact that the slavery model was basically instilled in people's consciousness.
We had videos where we talked about this.
In this aspect, it is interesting that it's the retinue that makes the king. But how? In what way? After all this is primarily based on human fear.
And by whom is fear generated? By the demons in the head. After all, they make material existence a priority of entire life, whereas matter is full of fears, full of destruction and everything else, as well as of false, temporary joy. Isn't that so?
It is.
Everything is very simple. If we look from the perspective of an honest, adult person, everything is very simple. And again, it is necessary to treat yourself solely as an adult. Nothing should dominate you except love, love for the spiritual world. Then everything will work out. Then you will begin to understand and respect people and understand what and how it should be. And the events in the three-dimensionality that the actors have prepared for you will not upset you or bother you at all. After all, these are their problems, not yours.
Yes. After all, basically such fear is simply a shifting of responsibility for your life. It seems to you that other people can influence your life.
Yes, but again, to whom does it seem? And who imposes this seem? Those very actors in the head. Isn't that so?
Yes, the army of Satan.
All, the army of Satan. Therefore, it is necessary to determine whose side are you on the side of light or darkness. Do you live to consume and exploit and be exploited? Or do you live to become equal among equals? Do you live to be temporary or to become eternal? Do you live to disappoint the hopes or to live up to them? The hopes of those who gave you life. Who are you? A true one or a traitor? It's up to you to decide, my friend. But this is true.
Igor Mikhailovich, people also noticed an interesting point regarding how the system actually focuses them on failures, on what didn't work out, and motivates this with the fact that we work on ourselves, we look into ourselves and search for mistakes. And
this is the first stage, the very first stage when a person has never engaged in the spiritual. He cannot feel anything. He doesn't understand anything, but there is something in him, an echo, and he feels a need for the spiritual. Consciousness says exactly the opposite, that you don't need this, but the person does feel. And in order to understand, and what is the most important thing that a person should understand, whether the devil exists or not, it is extremely difficult to understand whether God exists. Why? Because for a person who lives by consciousness, who is, let's say, a slave of his slaves, it's extremely difficult to understand that there is God, because he immediately has claims towards God, right? You show me, you give me, then I will believe in you. You do for me this way, you serve me. Look, serve. Whom should God serve? The demon. This is what consciousness wants from you. And at this point, this lie is extremely imposed. But when a person, a little bit, feels the spiritual need, you can't put it literally, then the first thing he can understand is the existence of the devil, the artificiality of this world. Then, naturally, with the help of logic, with the help of that very primary consciousness, not the secondary but the primary one, he can understand that the spiritual world also exists. Only then he will begin to feel, let's say, the presence of the spiritual world more strongly. Then he will be able to learn love when he gains at least some initial confirmation and understanding. And this first moment of struggle, of lack of understanding, all this takes place when a person begins his path from observing his consciousness. And when he understands that this is imposed on him, consciousnesses are imposed. These states, which he doesn't need at all, are imposed. Tell me, my friends, honestly, do you like it when you have despondency, despair, when you are torn apart from the inside, when you hate this world? Is that life? Is that wonderful? Well, really, I don't think so. I think you don't need this. Yet why is it imposed on you? And so, when a person begins to understand that it is not him who orders this music, but it plays by itself, and it nags and torments him and scoffs at him, or just the opposite. Euphoria is sent on him, every opportunity, permissiveness, the world is spread right in front of you. And then, at the perfect moment, all this collapses, and the person understands the lies of this side as well. That one is a lie, and this one is also a lie. But where does this lie come from? And the person knows and understands that he didn't order this. It all comes from the outside. And since it is from outside in his consciousness, it means that someone needs this, and there is someone behind this. So in such a way, The exposure of the devil and the understanding that he actually exists happens, my friends. And he really exists. And demons exist, and they are in you, in your head. But sometimes we get so immersed in some thought, we invest our attention to such an extent that we become part of Satan's world. Isn't that so? And then everything that it imposes on us becomes a reality for us. But only when we forget. All you have to do is take a deep breath and look at the situation, and you look at it from the outside. Yes, at this moment, even when you're observing from the outside, a desire is being imposed on you to resolve a conflict, an issue, or something else, from different perspectives in the best way for you. Is that really for you? Any life situation is considered from the perspective of the beast based on the precisely bestial qualities and bestial desires, but it never shows you spiritual options. If it pushes you to spirituality, the beast pushes to spirituality. Note, it pushes you only with the goal of increasing, let's say, its dominance over you in the first place and over others in order to seem but not to be. And people go to church, stand in front of the icons, pray, discuss which candle to buy, a cheaper or a more expensive one, and bargain with God. I'll buy you a candle for 50 cents or for 20 cents, and you will give me a carriage of all kinds of gingerbread cookies, for example. Isn't that so? That is how the beast treats God, because beasts treat each other exactly in this way, and it perceives God as someone equal, but very dangerous. That's what attitude it has. But we, my friends, we are personalities, the ones through whom comes the source of this power which these demons in the head hunt for. We are the conductor of that light which produces the synthesis of life in them. Without this light, they are dead. That's what they are hunting for, and we as personalities allocate this power, the power of life for them. If we give all this power to them, then we as personalities simply die and do not develop. And if we take it and redirect it to love, we get a confirmation. Let's go step by step, yes? The devil exists. That means we need to find God. How? After all, he is not in the external. In the external we see trees, houses, each other, bodies, not each other. But we perfectly feel and understand that the spiritual world is inside. It is what we call the soul. But again, how does consciousness twist that we are the soul? Well, is it so? I mean, the lie originally comes from consciousness itself, and we are ready to do everything to save the soul. Well, the soul doesn't sink, so we don't need to save it. You should save yourself as personality, and we can send love from personality. Learn to love. Because almost all of us don't know what love is when we are deprived of it, but we know well what slavery is, what selfishness is, what pridefulness is, what the domination of someone over someone is, while we do not know what love is. Therefore we have to learn to love. It's funny, but it's true. In our case, love is an association of physical training with each other. And that is what all love is about, and with the purpose of exploiting each other. And we call this love, isn't that so? Whereas true love, the real one, has nothing to do with physical training. It is our intimate thing of us and of the spiritual world. That's why we learn. But a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Everyone has this opportunity, the opportunity to become alive. And you can become alive only when you become a part of the spiritual world during your life here. And in order to become a part of the spiritual world, you must come to it. It will not come. The living does not enter the dead, just as the dead does not enter the living. There is a clear border, which is why we must leave the dead and enter the living. You see, everything is very simple. And we all know this, and we all feel this. But the actors forbid us to think about this. The actors forbid us to feel. But they only forbid us when they dominate us. So let it be us who will dominate them after all. Let us be masters of our consciousness, if it is ours. Isn't that so? And everything will be fine.
Igor Mikhailovich, there's also such a point that when people come into contact with strong, deepest feelings within themselves, then there is a desire to support this during the day as well, including with various tools, so as not to forget about the spiritual. These are various videos, projects, and books, and at some point,
At the first stages, yes.
yes,
It is like a tool that helps to support, so that, after all, consciousness distracts. And when people try to remind themselves by means of this, I mean, they're more in a state of perception through feelings. This is like a tool, and this stage should also exist, and it exists. But you still have to strive for what? For unity.
yes.
It is necessary to become a source of power of love, of God's love. But everything starts from the first steps, like any other path.
We were asked a question, why does it sometimes happen that the tools themselves already become a goal for a person?
It's substitution from consciousness. When we use tools, as you say, auxiliary tools on the spiritual path, they are still used through consciousness, rarely through the secondary one. It is always against. More often through the primary consciousness, it is closer and it is more, say, easily trained, a more obedient beast. But it's consciousness. And we still perceive all these auxiliary tools through consciousness. But again, it can be the very goal, the goal of lying and deceit from consciousness when it focuses a person on this. You see, and it doesn't allow a person to go further because, in order to go further, one has to leave the consciousness. But it does not want this. It wants to eat. That's it. The banal hunger of one beast can stop the angel on the path. And you must not forget that, my friends. We may use the beasts, but if it relates to love, we must love the spiritual world and each other. If you spend your love on beasts, you will become a part of them.
People also shared the situations when it seems that the system does not attack them during the day. It seems that there are no bad thoughts and nothing special happens in the outside world, but still it feels that something is wrong, some emptiness, and that it is somehow uncomfortable for a person in all this.
And how does consciousness come in? For example, at the beginning of the video, we were analyzing the situation around Alatra. Isn't that how consciousness comes in? It slowly attracts attentions from dark corners, it puts accents. Who experiences emptiness? Consciousness. The state of emptiness is the hunger of consciousness. Who experiences despair? Consciousness. Does it concern you as personality? No. But when it makes you perceive what it feels, you start to put your attention there. First, you start to listen, to feel, then to worry, and then you become the same. My friends, it's a trivial lie. It's a trivial setup from consciousness. So if you strive for the spiritual world, live by love, live by joy, but consciousness will always say, well, it's boring, right? It is boring for it. But it won't be boring for you. There is no boredom in the spiritual world. Boredom and sorrow and sadness and everything else occur where there is death and no living. And where there is living, it is always good there.
You have voiced very accurately now, and among other things, consciousness also draws people that it is good to understand the mechanisms of how this consciousness works, whereas the spiritual, in the opinion of consciousness, is somehow sort of childish, somehow simple, somehow, but...
It always simplifies and it always transforms all this. Well, say, into antiquity, into backwardness, into stupidity and childhood. This way consciousness plays on our pridefulness and our egoism. Have you become fond of the spiritual? Become fond of, mind you. You do not live by the spiritual, but you become fond of spiritual. I mean, even these arguments. This way it tries to belittle, to put down, to hurt pridefulness, to cut to the heart, meaning to pull the same strings. Well, that's not right. That's a trivial lie. It only tells you such nonsense when you listen to it. Stop listening to it. It leads you astray, while you begin to serve the spiritual world as you can, and force them to serve the spiritual world. That will be right. After all, it mocks you as a part of the spiritual world. So you mock Satan. Let him serve God. Whereas the spiritual world differs from the dead world, because there is life, joy, fun. It is filled with love. And that is wonderful.
Also, Igor Mikhailovich, such a point is described by people in the spiritual practice when they come into contact with the spiritual world, with its depth, they feel something very dear, and inside there arises something like a melancholic feeling, which turns either into nostalgia or some kind of longing, sometimes into emotion. What kind of feeling is this?
This is not a feeling, this is a distraction. Again, it is the performance of spiritual practice at the first stages, when we are still very closely connected with primary consciousness, but we already know how to feel, we already know how to love, but consciousness performs it together with us. It is still attached to us. Why is it attached to us? Because we still need evaluation. We cannot separate yet. And here, one of the tools that consciousness itself uses is to create a false feeling. We are in practice. We really begin to feel. And here a thought comes. What comes after all? An evaluation thought. Guys, evaluative thoughts are normal in the spiritual practice at the first stages. But our goal and task is not to listen. So it comes to you and tries to evaluate the quality of your spiritual practice. Or as Tatiana now said, the feeling of nostalgia about something when you feel your home, when you feel this love. Do not look at what consciousness palms off on you. Intensify. It starts to distract you only when it starts to lose ground. My friends, this means that the beast attacks only when you get stronger, so that you don't get even stronger. Remember this. When the system itself starts to shake you, it only starts shaking when you stop being shaky. When you have natural hesitations, you don't know yet, you don't have experience, it doesn't put much effort. But when you have the first experience, when you have the perception through feelings, or when you feel and know that this is your path, and you start to walk firmly, this is where the system throws in situations, assistance, thoughts, so as to begin to shake you. And then it intensifies your wobbles to lead you astray from this path. As soon as you get off the path, it will drive you into the stall and you'll be a milking goat. And you'll do what your feudal lords want you to do. And you won't get anywhere from this. It's the truth of life. And no one will get anywhere if they serve Satan. But a human being is far above Satan. A human being has the ability to live. Therefore, as soon as it starts to shake you a little, you should strengthen and concentrate your attention, not on what is trying to distract you with. You should forget this and throw this away, but you should strengthen your attention on the contact, on that dear and close. Get closer, reach for it. Pay all the attention there, and this will go away. This hindrance will disappear because you will become stronger. Everything is simple. I'm telling you, the spiritual path is very simple. And it's very easy to gain life. It's very easy. All you have to do is to step over the dead. But on this path, everyone has their stones. Let's put it this way. You can go around, you can step over, or you can listen to what the stones tell you. Stand and listen to them, and not go. It's up to you to decide, of course, friends.
It is very good to know that you should intensify love at these moments. The system tells people to save it or to sit out somehow, to wait for everything to settle down.
There is another mistake. Well, don't do anything, don't intensify it, wait. The animal attack will pass. So the animal will calm down a bit, You'll become freer. No, you won't. Once you've given up or given in, you get weaker. You have given the power that you had to direct to unity with the spiritual world, the power that gives you life. You give it to the inevitably dead. Will you become stronger? Let me give you a simple example. A person decided to become rich, began to work hard, began to earn money. He has a goal to become a truly rich person. And here the beggar approaches. He gave it to the beggar because he distracts him from work as he asks for money. Take it, he says to one, to the second one and the third one. Every day, the number of beggars increases. The amount of money decreases. Will this man become rich? Sorry, this is an example for the logic of your mind. He never will. I'm not saying that you don't need to give money to the poor, it's your business. But I'm just telling you that instead of working like you do, in order to have as much as you have, the beggar begins to beg and catch from you, and you begin to dish out money to him. Will you become rich? You won't. A beggar will never become richer, because he is a beggar by nature. He will drink everything away and squander it, and you work so that he drinks. Is that the right thing to do? After all, you help him. He's a beggar, I should help him. Well, he goes and buys drugs or alcohol, and deliberately kills himself. Are you doing good or bad? Here is the moral for you. It depends on how you approach this, right? But on the other hand, we need to help them, don't we?
Igor Mikhailovich, there is another point. People notice that in the spiritual practice, when they immerse, come into contact with the spiritual world, there is some commentator in the head who describes this process of immersion all the time.
This is not in the spiritual practices. It is still meditative practices or initial stages. This commentator is consciousness, both secondary and primary ones, and here the devil is manifested in all his charm. A person does not order anything, does not want anything. He is focused on perception through feelings. And he flows along this river, flows to this ocean. And at this point he hears from all sides, excuse me, a lot of different voices, pictures and everything else. After all, he doesn't order this, does he? Then where does it come from? And who is the master of your consciousness? Is that really you? Well, this reflects and shows very well. This is the initial experience. Later on, if a person follows this path and isn't distracted by these pictures and these voices, then excuse me, the river expands, becomes faster, and the ocean gets closer. And this ocean isn't going anywhere from you. But if, instead of sailing along this river, we land the shore, start gazing at these pictures, and then see the jungle with beautiful monkeys and all kinds of colorful little parrots and go look at them, then guys, will we sail to the ocean? A simple question. Sorry for such banal, childish associations. Yet how else to explain this? Only on simple examples. Whereas in fact everything is simple. If you are going to sail, then row. If you are going to the ocean, no matter how your body whines and no matter how much it wants to go ashore, you should row with all your strength and you will sail to it. If you stop rowing, you won't sail. It all depends on you, my friend. It's the freedom of choice. But you should make efforts on the spiritual path. These efforts are very simple and easy. They are very joyful and beautiful. This is really so. After all, any step in victory, victory over Satan, cannot but encourage you. When consciousness distracts you, but you step over it by taking this step, and you begin to feel more, you begin to get stronger spiritually. You begin to gain these droplets of life that are added in you. How can this not encourage? When you become part of the boundless, overcoming all the earthly and mortal, this is wonderful.
Definitely, human consciousness also notes what personality feels, and people noted that it wants to return a person into the same point, back into the same river.
Certainly.
And it says that this is what you...
Why does it want that?
It was the most powerful thing you experienced in your life.
Yes, exactly. This is also good when a person has got some experience. And then, as soon as he sits down to practice, immediately consciousness stereotypically imposes on him that starting point. But why? Because at that point, it evaluated, meaning it's a simple mechanism. At the point where you received the greatest experience according to consciousness opinion, you were under control, under the pattern of this consciousness. It allowed you to taste this joy a little, to taste this cake, and then it returns you all the time to the same point on the road. You're trying to go forward while it brings you back to that hotel by the road, where they make a delicious cake. They say it's the tastiest pie you can eat. Guys, where do you need to go? Forward, forward. So don't listen to these lazy fellow travelers. They're too lazy to go. They actually can't go there, but you can. So let them stay there and eat these pies, while you go ahead, go forward. And that's the right thing to do. Consciousness makes a big trouble for people. But when it begins to serve a human as a personality, then even consciousness brings great benefits.
Indeed, people feel this benefit and want to share this with other people. And one more point was noticed.
But they want to share only when they experience it all. This is already a more mature stage, but consciousness still has power over it. And when this desire becomes a need, this already speaks of the maturity of personality, when a person cannot do otherwise.
Another point that was noticed is that consciousness doesn't allow people to share with close people, let's say, with their friends' bodies, meaning it is easier to...
Consciousness is never an assistant in what regards the spiritual. It either prohibits or vice versa, pushes and creates conditions. When a person begins to talk about the spiritual or the good, precisely at the wrong time or in the wrong way, after all, we still use consciousness in conveying that very information and the knowledge or something else, right? Through consciousness we make it speak, because we finance this, and it has to speak. But if it is not controlled, it begins to put its 2 cents in, begins to confuse the commas. It seems it's the same as you want to say, but it puts it in such a way that a person doesn't understand. It makes him angry and enraged. And then consciousness immediately begins to blame you. It says, you see, they don't hear you. They don't want to listen to you. But excuse me, if you come up to an inevitably dead person who lives, pardon me, from one bottle to another, or let's say from one problem to another, and you come and start telling him what he doesn't need and isn't interested in at all, and you impose it with pridefulness and sermonizing at that, will they hear you? They won't. But consciousness will immediately tell you, you see, they don't hear you. They don't want to hear you. You can't convey anything at all. Sit and keep silent. What service? What are you talking about? What spreading of the knowledge? They will laugh at you. They will call you a sectarian. And you'll be crawling like that fireman, saving those who don't want to be saved, right?
There is another point that is really regarding, let's say, conveying this information and the knowledge to people. What people noticed is that it seems to them that when they just turn their attention to the solar plexus, even at the initial stages, they feel this warmth. Then consciousness naturally...
This is physical. It's a tried meditation. Excuse me, I can imagine that my finger has become warm and it will become warm. When we turn our consciousness, wherever we turn it, we activate the capillaries, and indeed the temperature can change there. It's an experiment, tritely anything can. Autogenic training, it has been verified 1,000 times. It gets colder or hotter, and it's measured with a thermometer. These are physical phenomena. When we start doing autogenic training, it seems to us that we are already spiritually great, right?
Yes.
Yes.
And people expected that they would utter words and consciousness would only say what the spiritual world wants.
Of course, sure.
However, they face such situations. Why does it happen this way?
And immediately consciousness turns on pridefulness, selfishness, and all kinds of nonsense, right? But if there is a desire in order for this not to happen, don't distort. Just don't distort it. Or tell the truth, that for instance, I'm interested in this. I can share with you, right? That which is interesting to me, I don't know here, I don't understand there. In this I'm still skidding, but here I'm getting something. Well, at least I'm getting warmth in my finger. When you tell people the truth, they will understand you better, my friend. Everything is simple. And one more thing. You need to understand, the dead don't always want to hear about the living.
Another such a...
But this does not mean that the sick ones shouldn't be treated. They should be. One shouldn't resuscitate the dead. Alatra is not a morgue. We're not even a resuscitation, even if he is inevitably dead. Then you shouldn't spend a lot of time and effort on prolonging his short period of time. But the sick ones should be helped to recover.
Also, in the spiritual practice, this was also mentioned by the Holy Fathers. Basically, they said that there is an issue that hinders a prayer. It is daydreaming.
A thought.
A thought.
Why? Because even in spiritual practice, in prayer practice, consciousness, when it's active and it dominates, it always sets a goal, an image, an endpoint. Where does it always begin to push a person? But where are you going if you don't know where to go? But in this way, if you set some kind of endpoint, some image, you won't come anywhere, because this is all earthly way. Well, this is a lie and deceit from consciousness. That's why it is said, whereas love has no image. It has tremendous power. It gives tremendous joy. It makes a person alive and happy. But it cannot be, so to say, even described in words, let alone imagine a certain form or some image of it.
Indeed, consciousness precisely pushes people towards a specific goal,
Certainly.
towards penetrating more into the spiritual, forgetting that this is a dialogue with the spiritual world, with God.
And immediately to use all their strength, strain their muscles, focus their consciousness. Not to put their attention, but focus their consciousness where? On the point. After all, it was said the point, right? Somewhere in the plexus area. And so we do this like in autogenic training. Let's put it this way, at the first attempts, the first stages. That's also good. Because you need to begin with something. And this is great. At the initial stages, it's just that you can't stay at the first stages all your life, my friends. You need to go. And go fast. Then everything will be fine.
People ask a question, but how can I keep what I have felt now in the spiritual practice, during the day, in everyday affairs?
Oh guys, it is actually very simple. Again, it all depends. We have talked about this many times. I'll tell you again. You have this feeling. You feel. You have felt it in practice. There is a trace after practice. This love, this joy inside. But if we do not keep this bonfire burning, it will go out. And we feed it with our attention like a bonfire is fed with firewood. In order for it not to go out, you need to constantly put firewood in this hearth. I mean, if we switch our attention to earthly affairs, it will go out. It's like, let's say we made a fire in the hearth, turned around and left the room. Then we came and everything burned down. And then we are like, oh my, we need to make the fire again. Of course, it is necessary to constantly put firewood. Then it is burning. And you need to constantly rejoice and feel this warmth. But when we feel that the warmth from the hearth is decreased, we can turn away and do our tasks. But we feel that the warmth has subsided. That means we need to put some more firewood. That is, redirect our attention to our hearth. Right? Right. It's very simple. Guys, sorry, these are again associations. For understanding with the mind, because we are talking now about those people who are striving for this, but have no personal experience. That's why, at least like that, so that there is understanding at least at the level of primary consciousness. Actually, it is very simple. We are where our attention is. And ideally, 90% of our attention should be redirected to love, to the spiritual world, to this contact, and 10% of our attention to all our remaining material life here, to existence, not life. Well, it won't work that way at first. At first it's already good even if you pay 10% of your attention, but constantly, then more and more. With each step, we'll get closer and closer to the goal, is that right? It's like training. For example, a person came to the gym, he never did physical training. What barbell will he lift? Of which weight? None. God grant that he can handle a barbell without any weight on it. But what if he goes there every day? Well, we take a healthy young man, but who was lazy before? And if he goes to work out every day, he'll have a small improvement every day, right? In a year or two, you'll see that a person already lifts a barbell with a decent weight. In 3 to 5 years, he's already an athlete. Is that right?
It is.
Just not to be lazy.
To act, to accumulate this experience.
Of course, but the fact is that consciousness is too lazy to go to the gym. And it is even more lazy to practice the spiritual. It doesn't feel like doing this. And this is too dangerous. Consciousness feels fear and danger before practicing the spiritual. And you should know this. That's why we take it by the ear and go. Not even at the first stages. Well, someone goes to the gym, well, someone goes to perform spiritual practices, although one thing does not hinder the other.
Igor Mikhailovich, there is also a question from people regarding how the system turns the spiritual into the daily routine. And the question is how to prevent consciousness from, say, people forget the purpose of their lives and what they wake up for on this day.
But people forget only when they pay much attention to the earthly, when they pay 100% of their attention to everyday life. And then they understand that the time comes for a prayer or a spiritual practice or a meditation, and they have to make even an effort, but consciousness doesn't want it, because it is destructive for it. And it turns out that a person, as if makes an effort to perform a prayer or a spiritual practice with reluctance. Well, is that normal? Of course it's not normal. So it turns into a routine, kind of a job, or some duty. And how, excuse me, can life be an obligation? How can love be an obligation if you are inspired by this? If you do not feel this, if you do not aspire to this, then you don't need this, right? Why does a slave need freedom if he doesn't strive for it? Well, I speak figuratively, but it is so. That's why such feelings arises in those who forget about God, who serve Satan. Because if we don't serve God, we serve Satan. There is no other option.
Yes, because the meaning of every day is to increase this love within yourself.
It's 100%. Of course, the meaning of our existence is a constant increasing of this love. But when a person already experiences this love, when he can increase it, when he cannot part with it for a moment, then he does not have such thoughts and cannot have them. And at the first stages, people of course get into such pincers from the system. It's okay, they step over it, they go further. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. This passes, it's all temporary if a person does his best and wants this. Everything is possible.
Igor Mikhailovich, thank you very much. Today we answered a lot of questions for people who start their journey, who follow a spiritual path. But there are also requests from those people who feel now.
Well, for those, words are not needed.
There is a request from them to be with them just for a minute.
I am always with them. But I understand what they are talking about. Let's still not turn the video program into our affairs. Right? I see.
Thank you very much.
For what?
For everything, Igor Mikhailovich, for love and for life.
This is for you, friends, thank you. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for being here. Let's just love each other and follow the straight way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Igor Mikhailovich, thank you very much.
Thank you.